Robert Donald William Farquharson, an Australian man born in 1969. He was the youngest of 4 children and had a special bond with his mother. He clung to her and his sisters. Even as an adult, he lived with his family until he met his future wife, Cindy Gambino. Despite being jobless, Cindy agreed to start a life with him in 1990. She had been in a relationship with a man who tragically died in a car crash, so she sought to be loved again. In the early days of the union, Robert swept her off her feet with his love and care. But later, things changed. She took on most of the responsibilities in their home, made critical life decisions, and provided for him. On the surface, he was a perfect gentleman, but deep down, he knew he had difficulties. Nevertheless, Cindy loved him, and they started a family. In October 1994, their first son, Jai, was born. 2 years later, Robert took a redundancy package from his employer, which he used to purchase a lawn mowing franchise for his local area. The venture cost him 40,000 Australian dollars. Gradually, his family became financially stable. They welcomed their second son, Tyler, in 1998. And in 2000, they tied the knot officially. Even with 2 sons and several years of history, she had doubts about the relationship. He insisted that they live close to his parents, and after his mother was diagnosed with cancer, he completely changed. She died before their last son, Bailey, was born in 2002. By then, Robert had grown into an unpredictable husband and father. Robert was depressed and refused to acknowledge it. Behind closed doors, he cruelly taunted his children, causing them to lose respect for their father. Cindy finally told Robert she was done. She had thought about it repeatedly before making the decision. In November 2004, she packed her bags and left, vowing never to return. Days later, she filed for divorce and reverted to her maiden name. Robert crumbled mentally. He resented Cindy for leaving and being independent without him. He was diagnosed with avoidant personality disorder and depression, which forced him to seek help. A person living with avoidant personality disorder is characterized by social anxiety, hypersensitivity, feelings of inadequacy, and extreme self-consciousness. Robert couldn't cope with the reality of his divorce and relied on antidepressants. Before the divorce, Cindy and Robert were building a house together. They agreed to sell it and split the capital after the divorce, but finding a buyer was difficult. Struggling financially, Robert moved to his parents' home. Cindy moved on. She began dating Stephen Moores. Stephen was the contractor for the home her and Robert were building prior to the divorce. They had been friends long before their separation. He too had 3 kids and had suffered a bitter separation from his wife. However, he was undeniably in love with Cindy. After the marriage crashed, Stephen felt it was time to take things seriously. This triggered extreme jealousy in Robert. On August 31st, 2005, Cindy was at home when Robert called her. It was nearly 10 months since they parted ways, and they didn't talk much. Robert vented to her the problems he had been facing since the divorce, also citing he had been sick with the flu all week. Cindy decided to be there for him. It was a few days before Father's Day, so she asked what he wanted to do for the special day. His mood lit up as he suggested she bring the kids to his parents' home. It was a day to celebrate his role in his children's lives. On September 4th, 2005, Father's Day, Cindy prepared to bring the children to see Robert. She could tell how excited they were to spend the day with their father. All 3 of them had presents for their dad and couldn't wait to give them to him. Robert was home and eagerly waiting to welcome them. When the boys arrived, they emptied their bags with smiles, revealing individual gifts. For a second, it felt like they were a happy family once again. But Cindy drove off, urging Robert to bring them home by 7:30 p.m. Cindy would have stayed for the sake of her children, but there was animosity lingering between them, which she couldn't ignore. Robert became bitter, wanted to get back at his ex-wife. At about 7:15 p.m, as Farquharson was returning with the children in his white 1989 VN Commodore vehicle, it then veered across the Princess Highway between Winchelsea and Geelong. It crashed into a fence before plunging into a farm dam filled with water. His 3 kids were trapped inside as the car sank into the water. Shockingly, Robert was able to escape, unhurt, but could not save his children. Instead, he ran to the road where he met Shane Atkinson and Tony McClelland, telling them of the incident, screaming that he had killed his kids. He also asked the men if he could have a cigarette. Robert then begged the men to give him a lift to Winchelsea so he could deliver the devastating news to Cindy. The men were concerned and asked to try to rescue the children instead of leaving. Robert urged them not to, stating it was too late and the children were gone. The men then took him to Cindy's house. When he arrived, he stood at the door, wet and dripping. "I've killed the kids. They are in the water," he told her. He explained that he had a coughing fit and passed out, and when he regained consciousness, he couldn't get them out. She turned pale as his words shattered her. At this point, Shane regretted driving Robert to Cindy's house when he should have tried to save the children. The mother of 3 sobbed and screamed in pain. She asked about their whereabouts. He told her they were still in the dam and already dead. Gripped with pain, she jumped into her car and forced Robert into the back. She drove wildly up the road to the scene of the accident. On her way, she phoned Stephen to recount the tragedy. She arrived at the scene frantic. Stephen arrived shortly after her. When she called emergency services, she wailed over the phone incoherently. While she waited for them to arrive, she and Stephen searched frantically for the car while Robert stood motionless. He stepped back and pointed to the darkness when she asked where the car was. Stephen took a deep breath and dived into the dam, searching for car traces but found nothing. In his younger days, he trained as a surf lifesaver and knew the signs of hypothermia. As emergency services arrived, she thought maybe a miracle could happen, and this tragedy would be undone. The thought of her boys trapped in a sunken car was too much for Cindy to process. "What are the chances of survival?" she asked a paramedic in a breaking voice. "Very slim," he responded. They had been in the dam for over 40 minutes, so this was no longer a rescue, but a retrieval operation. After hours of searching, emergency services finally found the boys in the vehicle without their seatbelts inside the cold, dark waters. Cindy and Robert planned and attended their son's funeral with family. Robert even bought 2 plots next to the boys' plot, one for Cindy and one for himself. 3 months after the deaths and a thorough investigation, the police filed murder charges against Robert. They went to his Winchelsea home to initiate the arrest, but he was nowhere to be found. Days later, he showed up with his lawyer at the Geelong police station. He was arrested afterward and charged with 3 counts of murder. His trial came to an end on August 21, 2007, in the Supreme Court of Victoria, presided by Justice Philip Cummins. A total of 49 witnesses took the stand during the 6-week trial. Cindy testified that she did not believe her ex-husband intentionally killed their children, stating it was an accident and that he loved them and would never hurt them. Robert told his friend Greg King prior to the incident that he wanted to kill his children to get back at his wife. By killing his boys, he would inflict on her the same pain he felt when she divorced him. He was also upset at how his wife took the newer of his 2 cars. Shane Atkinson, the witness who drove Robert right after the incident, recounted that Robert refused to call the police, but insisted on travelling to Winchelsea to tell Cindy himself. He had to borrow a phone to call the police, who had already closed for the night. Another witness, Michael Hart, who saw Robert hours before the accident, stated how Robert visited him that fateful day and asked to go to dinner with him. He said Robert wasn't feeling good and was coughing. He warned that he shouldn't drive since he wasn't feeling well. Matthew Norton, a sleep specialist, debunked Michael's claims, insisting that it was unlikely for Robert to have a coughing fit minutes before the accident. Coughing to the point of blacking out was rare, and it could not have happened in the warmth of his vehicle. As for the dam's owner, he testified that 7 vehicles had crashed through the farm fence in the last 8 years, but none had ended up in the dam. After 3 days of intense deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. They found Robert guilty on October 5, 2007, with Cindy shedding tears. Justice Cummins announced a 15-minute recess, allowing tension to ease before continuing. Robert received 3 life terms imprisonment without parole on November 16, 2007. Justice Cummins noted, "You wiped out your entire family in one act. Only the 2 parents remained. You, because you had always intended to save yourself and their mother, because you intended her to live a life of suffering." Dissatisfied with the judgment, Robert announced his intention to appeal. Cindy helped in this effort, leading a campaign to free him. His conviction was overturned on December 17, 2009, by 3 appeal judges. He was released on bail and handed over to his sisters. The retrial began on May 4, 2010, before Justice Lex Lasry QC. After 11 weeks of arguments, the second jury found Robert guilty of murder. This time, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a 33-year minimum. Cindy, who initially thought her ex-husband was incapable of such atrocity, saw a different truth during the second trial. She now believed that Robert deliberately drove off the road into the Dame, leaving the 3 boys to drown. During this trial, Robert's name was scratched out on the boys' plot. Cindy was forced to deny she was responsible. She launched legal action to remove Robert's names from her children's plot, to prevent him from being buried next to them, stating she would do anything to prevent her children to be buried next to the very person who murdered them. Robert is currently serving his life sentence. Cindy eventually married Stephen Moles. They went on to have 2 sons of their own. Unfortunately, she died on May 13, 2022, at age 50, after a medical emergency. Her family remember her as a warrior of justice. This incident has been regarded as one of Australia's most notorious crimes, altering the lives all involved forever. There is no way to seek understanding of Robert's actions. We extend our thoughts to the victims and everyone involved. We tell their story to honour their memory.